And if I remember correctly, I have to somehow mute this one. Yep. Okay. We should be good to go now. So can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So with respect to the budget, I know that Shanika and Ms. Connor have been working on this. So it is a work in progress, but thought that it would be good to get an early view. And if there was any open questions, we could talk about them, or any place where they needed any input. So Shanika, I will just let you roll.
Yes, ma'am. And Ms. Connor just chatted me and she asked for the link to the meetings. I'm trying to get that real quick.
Thank you.
Hopefully that will get her in.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So for the bond, for the budget, I have met with Miss Connor last week to start the process for the budget building. And I have inserted into the budget everything that I'm currently aware of. So that it is a, oh, hold on, Miss Connor, just video link.
Oh, let me let her in. I bet you she's waiting.
She says that's the video link, but if she can't call, she'll just open it and leave the video off. Is that okay?
That's fine. Sure.
Okay.
I can dig up the audio link if that would be easier for her.
I'm sorry. You would think this would be a little bit easier to find the information. Oh, it's because I didn't create it. Okay. That's why I don't have anything. Okay. So essentially for the budget, I have plugged in all of the numbers that I'm aware of. We don't have all of our contracts yet. So a lot of the things that I have for the budget are based upon best guesses from use of funds for this year and where we think we will land next year. I also put like the bond expenses, the anticipated utility expenses, the landscaping expenses, all of the positions that Ms. Connor has suggested that she would like to have for next year. So there's a lot that has gone into the budget, and preliminary looking at the numbers, of course, as always, we've got to make some investments. It's not going to work like it currently is. What I need from you guys is direction on best way for how we need to move forward with next steps with the budget. At this point in time, let me find it on my screen. At this point in time, with everything inserted into the budget, I am showing that I have an $86,000 surplus, and that's it, which is not sufficient. Within that budget, I need to confirm with Nigel also the percentage that we need to leave in our reserves in order to be held accountable for our bond, which I believe, after speaking with him, would be approximately $150,000. So I know we haven't met that goal. And then also what I needed to know from you guys is how much surplus do you guys want for us to carry over so that I can build that into the budget as well, over and above the reserves. So there's a few factors that I need assistance from. The first thing is that in this budget build, I did not include the before and after school expenses or the payroll for the staffing. And I did this for a few different reasons. Number one, it's a total separate checking account. And I feel like it should have its own budget that it supports itself, which financially it can.
Yes.
And so I was going to ask if that's okay for us to do that moving forward. And if so, I'll build that out that way. What are your guys' thoughts about that?
I think you're dead on. That is something I have. Oh, Ms. Connor's waiting to be admitted. Okay. Here she comes. But to answer your question, it's something that I've wanted to get a better handle on is how is the before after school care self-supporting? And are we confident that it is? And if not, what does that tell us we need to do? So
yes, ma'am.
I mean, I realize it might be break even, but I would just like to know. We have never had a good handle on that, in my opinion. So
yes, ma'am.
Hello, Ms. Connor.
If she can't stand us, if she can hear us.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Thank you.
Hello.
We're talking about budget, so and we're not really sharing anything but the agenda, so audio is fine.
Can you guys hear me okay though?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Great.
So I had just stated, Ms. Connor, that with the budget that I've built, I intentionally did not put before and after school salaries, nor did I put their expenses into the budget because first off, they have their own checking account that they deposit their funds into, and I feel like it should be a separate budget. Like Ms. Ward was just saying, that helps kind of close the gaps on, is this a self-funding program, which it is. There is still currently Ms. Diamant's half of her salary is designated towards Casa as an administrator or HR assistant, and the other half is designated towards the before and after school program. And if you do the math based off of that, it is a self-supporting program at this point in time with the current numbers that we have. And I would just like to create a separate budget for it, was what I was asking, and Alice was giving her blessing. Everyone,
Monique, feel free to speak up if you have any thoughts.
My thoughts are that I agree with you. I'd like to know not only that it breaks even, but how much is it actually supporting the school? So I think, I mean, I think granular in that sense is beneficial.
Okay. All right. So because of that, that does create a little bit of a, when we did the revised budget from last year, of course, I know you guys had almost kind of copied over the year before's budget and just replicated it for this year. But the before and after school program had dramatically dropped off with attendance. And so it created this very skewed number with the budget itself. So I think if we separate them out, that it will be, it won't skew our budget, which is what not our budget, it's all of our budgets, but it won't skew the general fund budget, which is my thoughts on that. So I will work towards that direction then, to separate those out. What I didn't do though, is I still did include the preschool program. I included it with the budget because those preschool students are dispersed throughout all of the pre-K kindergarten classrooms. Our current budget, for some reason, there's a line item that was just for the preschool teacher and for the preschool assistant, but that's not accurate because that's not all that that person does. They do not just work exclusively with the preschool department. So I want to clean that up as well internally on the reporting side so that those funds do come into the budget, into the general fund. I'm trying to kind of separate all of the different programs to where I think they need to go. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I think what you're proposing is reasonable. I suspect it's a lot of gymnastics to separate out preschool, so I wouldn't go to excessive level of effort to do that. And I think I don't know, with preschool and before, after, it's a business decision for us. If they were ever in a position where we weren't making money on them, it's a call we'd have to make on, is it worth doing or not? But I don't know that we're there. So I'm I think what you're proposing is a good first step. And if we ever want to change it, we can advance to maybe rolling preschool into that for-profit bucket. We could, but do what's feasible this year, and it'll be a good step forward.
I was gonna just ask, or I guess to add on to when you were explaining that all of the resources for pre-K is blended with kindergarten. So if we don't, I think if we don't precisely know the expense for each pre-K student, it's probably simpler to just leave that in our overall budget and just know how much that adds. To me, the before and after school care is much more of much more of an exercise of making sure, because it truly is just ancillary. I feel like we know, well, I don't know. I was going to say, I feel like we know that the private pre-K program is beneficial, but I'm like, I don't know. I guess we don't know unless we at least average what the cost is per student, maybe even in the kindergarten range, so that we'll know that the pre-K program, do we need to increase our fees, not just on what competitors are doing, but on what the school is spending on them.
Okay.
I had some thoughts about that too. Ms. Cobble, you will know this and I don't, but are any, we only have one right now, but is our pre-K teachers, pre-KK teacher, is there any compensation of hers that comes from that private programs funds, or is it all just out of the general budget?
It all gets deposited into the same general fund budget.
Okay.
And so the only place where this would really get rectified, honestly, on my end, on the internal side, would be how it's coded. Because currently it's coded to where our pre-K teacher, which we only have one this year, the pre-K teacher salary, her full salary is coded to the pre-K program, but that's not accurate. That's not a good representation of what she's doing.
Because she has kindergartners in her classroom, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And she has more kindergarten than pre-K. The other thing I think of, based on what Ms. Taylor was saying, like, we don't distinguish between, when we're making purchases for classrooms, we're not saying these materials are for pre-K. Right. And so we're only spending, you know what I mean? Like, when we make purchases for a pre-KK class, it just is made for that class, but not that we're spending any specific funds for a pre-K. Because the materials can be used for both pre-K and kindergarten.
I think some cost comparisons could be made between, if we had 30 kindergarten students in this classroom, this is the revenue that we would receive, versus now we have 30 pre-K students in this classroom, and this is the cost comparison, because we don't give our preschool students any more or any less than we give our kindergarten students. I think that would be a good comparison. But other than that, like you guys are saying, it's really difficult to do a cost. You could do the teacher salary for sure, but if we're spreading them out over 5 classrooms, it just gets real muddy quick. So I definitely want to do away with the stigma of someone's salary is designated towards the pre-K program, because no one's full salary will be designated towards it. And maybe this is something I could talk with Nigel about as in CSP about, digging further into it, because maybe this program does in itself need to have its own budget. And there's some, cost analysis that need to be done, because it is a for-profit program. So I will ask. My instinct is to definitely fix what we're doing now. That what we're doing now doesn't work, because the way it's being designated is not accurate. But maybe there's a better way. I know we can designate like a quarter of someone's salary to a program, kind of like what we're doing with Miss Diamont, where half of it goes to before and after and half goes to HR assistant. So maybe that's what we need to do. Definitely not what we're doing now. So I'll do some more research on that before we get to, and that's all coding on the back end. That doesn't necessarily impact the budget presentation itself. Well, that helps me with those two areas that I had questions about. But then I also wanted to know how much, okay, and this kind of, all of this kind of ties into the third item on the agenda,
right.
That will help me kind of finalize with Ms. Connor where the budget is headed. Because we are going to be absorbing both the rent payment and the bond payment. You know, I don't know that that was ever intended to have happen in our budget. And with that also comes 2 sets of utilities and 2 sets of telephones and some of that, you know, not for as long, but for a period of time. That hurts the budget rather hard. And so what I talked with Alice about the other day is, are we allowed to tap into the $2 million that was set aside for the buyout, or are we allowed to do some things that would assist with the budget so that we're not necessarily having to cut the budget in order to make this happen? And I have some recommendations, but I guess I first need to know, not really first, but the next line of thought is there a cutoff? So the budget that the very rough budget that I've created so far only takes us through December. So 6 months of the fiscal year for us to maintain 2 locations and 3 for one, for, you know, for that alternative site for MD for a period of time. So do we have a cutoff, or do I need to extend that for the full year? What are your guys' thoughts? And I know that's maybe not necessarily a decision we make, but it is important for the budget preparation to have a direction.
So
What's the cutoff
Go
for
ahead,
our
Marty.
expenses? No, I just want to be clear about the question. Are you saying, should we project our expenses past December?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Sorry, were you asking if we should project our expenses past December? Like, what do you mean by cutoff?
Yes. So I didn't know if, right now I have in the budget for the 2 locations through December. Hopefully that, and I know this isn't probably
I think
realistic, but that it's,
Shanika's doing a full year budget, Monique, not a 6-month budget, but her
For the-
assumption was that we would only have the rented facility till December in the current version. That's what she's asking.
yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I know it's hard
Sorry.
to, I know we've already talked about it, so I know what she's doing.
Get excited with my words.
It's okay. It's okay.
I could save it's $300,000 roughly for us to have the lease in addition to the bond payment. And we can absorb the bond payment. That's not a problem, but you know, $300,000 is a lot of money. And it's what I need to meet the reserves and create a buffer for the budget. So
Yeah, I mean, that solves all the problems if that were to magically go away, but I don't think it'll go away totally.
Yeah. So I didn't know if we had a vision. I mean, my vision is that the building is rented out and it's not an issue.
So yeah, this is a tough one. So Monique, well, just for everybody's education, I did do some math, and I looked back at some of the older calculations we've done. And if we were to leave the building by the end of December, and hence quit paying rent from January on, or let me say that differently. If we were to, I got to try this again. I'm not saying this very eloquently. So our lease payments from January of 2023 through the end of the lease, by my calculations, and I'd probably want Trademark to look at these, would be about $1.8 million. So the $2 million that's sitting in bond working capital that was earmarked for lease termination, we could cover all the remaining rent payments. I did not include in this TICAM So we would have to cover, we'd have to come up with some money to cover TICAM, but we have 2 million, and I'm thinking the lease payments would be about 1.8. So, the worst case is, Shanika, that we just feed in a bond draw that offsets every lease payment we make, and kind of brings us to a net zero. But part of the reason this is on the agenda is because it's probably time to kind of crank up an exploration of our choices again.
Well, and like I mentioned to you, Alice, when we spoke earlier, I feel like, because we're moving out in October, we're not getting a lot of bites to rent the space, when we move out,
Right.
someone move in November. But I do think that if we could hold on to it for a period of time, that we could find someone for the next school year, someone that wants to move in the spring, and go ahead and get ready for the next school year. I feel almost confident that would be a possibility. So, I guess what I'm asking is, what do I need to strive, budget wise? And could we tap into some of this funding to know that we could do it without having to affect our operating budget? Or I do have another possibility, if you guys are ready to hear Plan C.
Sure.
So Plan C is, as you guys know, we have plenty of money in reserves. We're supposed to have, I think, 120 operating days in our budget per our bond, at a minimum, which we have. That's not a problem. But what we could do, if you guys would rather wait to make a decision on this, is create a line item on our budget that is our reserves from the bank account. And essentially, we would give this operating budget, this year's budget alone from our bank account. If we need it, we have it available. But if we don't need it, then we don't take it out of the bank account. So what happens every year with our budget, any funds that we don't spend, anything that becomes a surplus at the end of the year, stays in the bank account, obviously, but we can't touch it without special accounting permission in order to spend that money. So right now we have $2.4 million in the bank, which is great, but we can't just spend that money on whatever we want. We have to have an accounting reason for it. And then there's some behind the scenes auditing type things that have to happen, saying why we tapped into that money. So what we could do, if you guys wanted, is that we could appropriate so much money so that it goes into the operating budget for the next fiscal year that would cover the building expenses. Or we could tap into the bond payment. It's an option. And that is another question that I had asked CSP of what all the correct lingo was, so that I wouldn't trip over my words to you guys on how that actually happens. But it is available to us. And I will say this, I don't think we need any of those funds that are currently sitting in the bank to do anything with the building for next year, unless something drastically goes wrong, which I'm not anticipating it. We have several pockets of contingency funds that I think are going to cover any potential expense, including outfitting the building, rather well, might I add, that I don't know that we need our money that's in the bank in order to do that. And a third option, a fourth option, I don't even know what options we're on now. We're going to have quite a nice surplus at the end of this year.
Yeah.
We have stayed on target. We have done well. We have spent well. And thankfully, due to all of the ESSER funding that we have, which is really the difference from next year's budget and this year's budget, is all of that ESSER funding. We could also carry over the money that we're getting from this year. So that's just going to add, we're probably going to be closer to 3 million by the time we get to July, just sitting in the bank as our funds. So that's a lot of options. This is not something I would typically ask you guys to consider. But because of the move and because of the added expenses for the 2 facilities is the only reason why I'm asking that we consider doing something so that we can be best prepared. I'll let y'all go from there.
That was a lot.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's good that you're thinking through all these things. So I think there's really 2 questions here. One of them is, what assumptions do we want to make to prepare the budget for for next year about the continuation of the lease payments? That's one question. Then the other question is, what actions do we want to take, if any, to start pursuing more aggressively sublease choices now that we have our hands around it, a date that we feel reasonably comfortable the facility would be available for someone else? And we probably couldn't resolve or come up with a deal on a sublease of any sort fast enough to include it in the budget, but we may want to make a conservative budget decision, and then if we have an outcome that's better than what's in the budget, we just modify the budget when we know that outcome.
I don't disagree with that, but I'm just curious, Shanika, if was anything confirmed for that furniture company to see our
No,
no?
they decided not to come because they said the demolition cost was going to exceed what they wanted to pay, so they did not come.
Gotcha.
I was excited. I was like, oh,
Oh, great.
yeah. Which is why I was like, oh, when I started working on the budget, I was like, I'm really going to have to, we're going to have to at least project what we think we want to do and have a plan B if that doesn't work out. And that's where I'm at. These are all contingency plans.
Right.
So I'm just wondering if we said, I don't know if this goes under one of your like 440 options, but are we allowed to like prepay? Like, can we put that into our expenses now? And we can?
I'm fairly confident we can. I will confirm. I've done that before. We would need to work with our landlord and make sure that they're comfortable with doing that, like creating a credit on our account. But yes, we can prepay. The only thing we can't prepay is our salaries.
Okay. So the worst thing that can happen, we prepay some of the rent and then we have to do some reallocation. Maybe if we end up having to buy ourselves out, that's what the 2 million is for anyway.
Right.
And plan E at this point, or plan 5, we can tap into our reserves at any point in the year with the revised budget. So let's say we did prepay 4 or 5 months of rent at the end of this year with our surplus funds. Then we get to December and we're like, we got someone that's interested, but they don't want to move in until May. So we need to, either draw down from the bond, or we could take cash out of the bank to help offset our expenses. We can do either one. It doesn't have to be done now, but I'm just trying to project. There does have to be a plan, because otherwise I have to cut positions in order to make the budget work for next year. And
Okay.
I'd rather not, because that's going to be our biggest cost savings other than rent. It's going to be salaries. So I'm
Right.
trying to hold on.
There's
to
nowhere
positions.
else to go that would cover that much money. Yeah.
So that's what I'm up against, is do we cut positions or do we not hire? That's why we're having this conversation first before Miss Connor and I dig deeper into the budget.
I feel like if we can front load it and spend it even out of our surplus or something, I don't know.
Okay.
I think we should either in the budget, I mean, this is off the top of my head, or with available cash, we should go ahead and pay at least some of the first 6 months of rent for next year.
Okay.
This is thinking out loud so y'all can react, but like from July through December, maybe a combination of prepaying a couple 2 or 3 months and then planning for 2 or 3 months to come out of reserves. And those numbers are all modifiable. That's just a stake in the ground. Then, Monique, I think we should go back to Trademark and just ask them again I was thinking about Revitalize. I don't know where they ended up landing, but I don't see any reason not to go back to Revitalize and say, we can turn this building over to you in December or in January, and you could begin planning for your next school year. And then also just reach out to some of the other new charter schools and see if, let Trademark help us kind of ramp up the marketing again, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think they've been a little more on it than I gave them credit for before. I kind of thought she had us on the back burner, but she's been
okay. I haven't seen any indication of that, but I'm not doubting you. I just haven't been copied, so.
That was just part of the, like the furniture people was just her reaching out and saying, I think I've got
great.
And she just wants to be kept up to date so that as they come across people, they, they'll know what timeline to offer them. So I don't think it'll be a problem to keep them, looking in our behalf. But yeah, I've got you. I mean, it doesn't hurt to make a very clear statement.
And just a little bit of really targeted marketing, like some reach out to, there was quite a few charters issued recently. So a reach out to some of those new charter schools to say, we'll be vacating in December. And that, there may be a way to use for you to take advantage of this space that's already set up as a school type thing.
Because I do feel like, we're a perfect setup for a school to come in. I think for the next school year, we'll be fine. But, it's getting to the next school year.
Right.
On our end.
But maybe then we assume that, we just, I don't know how you put this in the budget, Shanika. That's why we have you. But maybe then we assume that that after January, we just turn around, we pay our lease and then we turn around and submit it as a bond reimbursable expense and start drawing that $2 million down.
And we definitely have enough cash flow to do that. That's not, that's not an issue.
But that, that $2 million is non-taxable borrowing. So, or taxable borrowing. So, we can spend it on just about anything, including just paying ourselves back for the rent.
Okay. Is there anyone I need to confirm that with, or just for?
That I think is that's exactly what it was intended to be. So.
Okay.
I think that. Do you disagree, Monique?
I do not disagree.
Okay, so to make sure I understood correctly when I'm building the budget, we're going to do we would like to, I'll confirm with whoever our current landlord is, forgot their name, but I'll confirm with them that we can make a prepayment with our surplus funds for this fiscal year that will cover July through December. And then.
Or some portion of that.
And when we get to actually June and we see what our surpluses are, then we can make a final decision.
Final plan, yeah.
And then the plan budget-wise would be January through whenever that we would draw down from the bond. Or we'll have a plan. I don't need to take it out of the operating funds, is what I'm trying to say.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Well, this is where I get all balled up in the accounting so I need your help. But do we have to show it as operations that's then reimbursed by bond money? I mean, you know what I'm saying?
So what I would probably do is create a revenue line item.
Okay.
That's the bonds,
That's bond draws. Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
So that when we expend it out, because we'll have to cut a check from the operating account. So I need to show how I paid for that somehow.
Gotcha. Okay. Good.
Okay. So the second, Ms. Connor sent a text message that she's in a not a good cell area. Yeah, okay. she'll come back when she can. So the other question is, I need to put into the budget the reserves, which doing what we just did takes care of the reserves. But how much additional funding? You guys have always had a healthy surplus from year to year. Is how do you want me to do that for next year? Because the new positions and everything does take away from us having that type of carryover from year to year.
Right.
And so I don't want to present you a budget that gets you down to, okay, everything's allocated and that not be a direction that you guys want to go in. And I know, Alice, you and I have had this conversation in the past of was there a dollar amount or was there a percentage that you guys were looking at, that for why you did that every year? And at that point in time, you explained that there were many years where it was lean and green. And so you guys had just built up the budget and you guys have done a great job of that. So do you guys have a dollar amount or a percentage or what's your line of thinking for that?
That's a tough one because really in recent year or not too much before you arrived, we were scraping to have a positive bottom line budget. We would we basically would not budget a surplus. We'd just try to come in as close to zero that was on the positive side as we could. And then as events unfolded, things got better, and that's how we produced the surpluses. So budgeting a surplus is a new concept for us. But I think it's a good one to have because we should be setting aside monies, for building maintenance, and we should have money. We should be able to be. We should have more cushion now that we're an owner than we did before.
Right.
So I don't know. What have you done at other schools, Shanika? Have you had a percent of revenue or?
I did. So there was a percent of revenue that we set aside. It started out at 3%. And as our cash on hand, and we did 3 months of operating expenses. So it wasn't just days of revenue or, how they calculate it different ways, but I took literal 3 months of expenses. And that's what we kept in the bank. And then once we reached that threshold, which Casa certainly has, once we reached that threshold, then we dropped it to 1.5%. So it really just depends on, we were in the same situation where we owned our building. Well, we didn't own it, but it was under a bond payment. And so we had gotten to the point where we were able to do that. So currently Casa carries over each year more than 10%. So
yeah,
it's a lot when you look at, and I understand why we've done it in the past. It was needed because we do need that money in the bank. We do need those days on hand. And so I would recommend on top of the reserves that we're already going to have, which is going to be about 2%, or $200,000, not 2%. It's going to be about $200,000 that we're going to keep cash on hand that's earmarked just for reserves, just for the bond. Okay, so that's a requirement that we have. So that's already a surplus that's going to be in the budget. I would recommend at least another 1.5%, which would put you at about 3.5% would be my recommendation. But that's just from prior finance experience. That's not because someone like a CPA or someone has said this is a good number. That's just, I think we should try to carry over every year. I don't think we need to try to get down to 0, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right. Well, if I had to pull a number out of the air, I was going to say 2%. So that's pretty close. We're pretty close.
All right.
Monique, any thoughts?
My thoughts are that I was going to ask Alice, the finance lady, for the number.
Okay. Well, why don't we aim for 1.5 to 2%? And if, as we get the detailed numbers, if we see any other opportunities, maybe we can boost it up a tad more.
Okay.
But I think that especially for the first year, I mean, and then a year of operating in the new building and getting everything we need to really make that place tick, we will have a lot more insight and maybe be able to do a little better. I don't think this has to be our biggest saving year right now. Yeah.
Well, and that does allow us, actually, because of that, all of our furniture is going to be new. Like there's hardly anything that's going to be, need to be replaced or repaired this year is the goal. And so because of that, I can trim some budgets that will have to increase in future years, right?
Right.
So I think that's good. And then in future years, that allows us to increase those budgets moving forward, as the building's 5 years old, 10 years old.
And I would just be careful about even this. I just feel like in next year's budget, we almost need a contingency line item because as much as we've planned, and I think all the work has been fabulous. When we get in that building, it's like when you buy a house and you actually live there, you're like, I really hate this particular attribute of this house. And I just don't know how long I can stand it. There'll be a couple things like that. And just, for morale and everything, I'm hoping we can address some of those quickly. So, but we'll do what we can and we won't do what we can't. So.
Okay. So I will take all of that, knowing those two big factors that you guys have helped me with, and I will rework the budget. This actually puts us in a really good spot to honor the things that Ms. Connor has asked for. And for me to go back through the new hire list that she wants to structure. And this is very helpful.
Super.
To get us where she would like to be and also where I'd like to be. So, okay. And I told Alice, Monique, I didn't get a chance to tell you yet, but I've already seen the financials for May, and we are right on the money. We're doing good. So there should be a pretty healthy surplus at the end of the year that will help us do a lot of the things.
Like pay next year's rent or something. How exciting is that, right?
Yeah. So I'll reach out to the landlord and make sure that they're okay with us creating that that surplus on our account and
Sweet.
Go from there.
Can I just ask an ugly question? At what point are we willing to talk about actually buying off the lease?
That's up to y'all.
I mean, I think that may be the other thing it's a great question to talk to Trademark about is, maybe we do a little more marketing, and I'm just really curious what they're seeing in the market because with all this inflation and the potential for a recession, and there's a lot of panic in the world right now. What would they recommend? Do they know anything about where our landlord and its holding company is right now, as far as would they welcome cash, and would it be a great time to go to them and say, in January, we'd like to buy out this lease and we'll give you $2 million. Would they love that? Or would they not want, would they come back and want to hold us to the lease?
And to be honest, I'd love to say I'll give you 1.5.
Exactly. I mean,
You
you
know.
might start out with, I'll give you $1 million.
Yeah.
And, work your way out of the negotiation part. I think they're very good at. So,
Yeah. That gives them 2 years, really, 2 years worth of
Yep.
rent, and if they can't find some, I mean, well, here we are trying to find someone ourselves, but, and I guess that's kind of, and Monique, I don't know who answers that question, who answers the question of at what point are we doing a cutoff, financially, I have a plan for next year, so I feel much more comfortable, but that doesn't mean that we can't, go ahead and start these plans. For all we know, they might say, yeah, let's close it in October for $1 million, okay, let's get out of it. So, I will tell you, I did go into a brief moment of panic though, when I realized, when I started planning this budget wise, and I only did the budget for 2 places through December. And I went, move right out of one and then make sure the other one's totally emptied, 6 weeks later.
yeah.
We can make it happen. But, that is kind of, as much as we're organizing and thinking about getting ready to move into one, it's going to take as much effort to make sure that we're fully out of the other one. So, what do you guys think?
I mean, I'd rather lose 300,000 than 2 million. I just thought I would ask the question of when are we tired of managing 2 places?
I mean, I think we should have it as a goal for fiscal year 2023 that we resolve the lease situation, whether it's buying them out or having a sublessor or whatever we think is the best solution. We should identify and do it. Because I don't want to go into another year with this kind of contingency hanging out.
I agree.
And that's why we put 2 million aside, was to do something.
Alice, the goal will be that before you and I leave the board, we will clean this up.
That's the last thing we clean up. Yeah, I agree. No, I'm good with that. I think that makes perfect sense.
Okay.
I just sighed a very nice sigh of relief. Not that I want you guys to leave, but
wait, I was like, you're like, oh, thank God.
God, they're gotta be out of here.
No. If you guys are making this a goal to have resolved, then I know it will be resolved before the end of the fiscal year. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a good loose end to kill.
Okay. All right. So with all of that being said, I'm going to go back to the drawing board with Ms. Connor on where we are with the budget. How I can be ready. I don't know if Ms. Connor will have had a chance to review with me before the board meeting next Thursday. So I mentioned to her, she said if we could make it happen, she would work hard to make it happen. But does it need to go back to you two before we present it to the board? Or do you want us to plan? I'm on vacation at the June 2nd board meeting, but I know it probably needs to be presented at the June 2nd board meeting if we don't present it next Thursday. So what are our next steps with the actual budget presentation to the finance committee and then to the board?
So I have some things to toss into that mix too, is I'm actually traveling June 6th through the 18th.
Okay.
But, and I don't think June 2nd would be too early of a meeting for us, right, Monique? Don't we usually do the 2nd and the 3rd, or 2nd and 4th?
We do 1st and 3rd.
Oh, 1st and 3rd. Okay, what's wrong with me? So, June 2nd, I'm game to try to cover for you, Shanika. And I would still be available.
Okay.
The 16th would be a tough meeting for me to make, but I have complete confidence that you guys will, will be well enough along that you guys can handle it. So,
okay. So to give Miss Connor enough time, because I know she's in testing, the next 2
Right,
weeks, so her
right.
time is constrained.
Right.
Could we plan to meet the week before the June 2nd meeting to review the budget?
So that would be the 26th.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Are you
Want to
okay
have a
with
finance
that?
committee meeting that on the 20th?
May 26th.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I will not be available, but I will be happy to look at notes and respond.
Or there's nothing magic about Thursday. Would the 25th or something be better, Monique? Or
Actually, I mean, that whole week, I'm actually
you're out of town? Okay.
Well, I'm
Okay.
taking a class and I won't be available
Gotcha.
the evening. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well then, Shanika, if you're good, let's plan on the 26th, and we'll do our best to loop and summarize, take good notes, and share those with Monique.
Okay.
And then we'll have a board meeting on June 2nd to present
For the budget.
and approve.
And then for the May 26th, what I'll do is just like I did last time, like a side-by-side comparison, and then
That's
highlight
awesome.
what I changed. And then
Yep.
what actually gets presented to the board will be the pretty
The pretty one.
version.
But yeah, the comparison though is super helpful for these folks.
It is.
Yeah. So don't hesitate. We can present that if that's easier. I don't want you creating duplicate stuff if you don't need to.
It's okay. Not a problem.
I honestly think that's what the rest of the board would prefer, to be
Prefer
honest.
to see. I agree.
Side by side.
Yep.
And you guys haven't had to have this, but to report to the DP, well, you've reported your budget to DPI, but they like a more of a slim line.
Clean. Yeah, right.
So the one Monique signs will be slim and pretty.
That's fine. No, that's cool.
But yeah, that way everybody will have those details, and if they have questions, they can see happen. All right, I will have it ready. And
You're
Alice,
great.
I have that whole, if you want to meet during the day, if that's better. I'm
Sure.
not sure what Miss Connor's schedule looks like, but you just let me know.
Well, I'll go ahead and put the meeting out there, or send a note and try to get a time nailed, and we'll figure it out from there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate
Great meeting
it.
everybody.
Yeah.
Oh, Monique, do you want me to reach out to Shelley and just say that we want to start to discuss options again? Do we want to meet with them and kind of get them to give us an update based on current market conditions?
So
Or
to
what do
be
you think?
honest, I'm sorry, since my brain is usually super crowded. I owed her our latest construction update. I give her an abbreviated version of what BCCG sends us. So I actually sent that to her while we were talking. And when you mentioned questions, I threw it in there. So what I'll say is, when she responds, maybe I'll just copy you and ask her if we can have a meeting. Because I already put your questions out there.
Super. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry for being so.
No, I'm totally fine with that. I just want to keep it moving, And if you walk out of a meeting without somebody owning the to-do, nothing gets done.
I hear you.
All right. Well, thank you, ladies. I really appreciate
All
it.
right. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Yeah.
Great
have a
meeting.
great night.
Take care. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Bye.
Bye.